Of all Frank Sinatra's legendary hits, maybe his most quintessential is the 1969 classic record My Way. An English cover of French musician Claude François' Comme d'habitude, My Way has aged as a beloved track of individualism and self-perseverance. Its themes of pride and living a life without bending to the wills of others, resonating with listeners of all generations. Sinatra's song has widely been revered by billions around the globe, but in many parts of the Philippines, locals have forebodings about the timeless tune for its association with a string of karaoke bar murders occurring over the span of a decade. A phenomenon such as this might sound far too ludicrous to be true, but as it turns out, there have been at least a dozen separate cases of karaoke singers being killed while singing Frank Sinatra's hit song within the years of 2002 and 2012 alone. Now, karaoke's popularity in the Philippines is very noteworthy in regard to these murders. Many Filipinos visit the nation's countless karaoke bars, or videokes as locals say, as a favorable pastime. And with a majority of its population living under the poverty line, karaoke has essentially served as a fulfilling escape from the troubles of life for an affordable price. Visitors can purchase time on a videoke machine for just a convenient 5 Philippine pesos, or roughly 10 cents. And from there, are able to spend this time enjoying themselves to the pleasures of karaoke and growing closer to their community through singing their favorite tunes. However, for an activity as lighthearted as this, there are those who are very passionate about karaoke, some significantly more than others. Any minor inconvenience can be just enough to stir rage within this distinct sector of visitors, whether it's singing out of tune, hogging the microphone, or playing a song that some people may dislike. There are also many who think very highly of their favorite records, growing frustrated when an oblivious visitor indirectly ruins the listening experience while karaoke singing. Songs as renowned as My Way fall directly into this category of tracks not to be disgraced, and several incidents have shown that doing so can lead to deadly repercussions. Murders in the Philippines that are in connection to Sinatra's My Way date as far back as 1998, though the killings would peak in popularity during the 2000s and early 2010s. Perhaps the most notable case is that of Romy Bailigula. On May 29, 2007, the 29-year-old man happened to be singing My Way at a bar in San Mateo. Though having a good time, he was distinctly off-key, much to the dismay of one Robilito Ortega, a nearby security guard. Initially, Robilito was friendly towards Romy and his company, but the situation escalated as he began criticizing Romy's poor singing in a rather distasteful manner. The two eventually got into an intense confrontation, and as Robilito grew restless, he pulled out a .38 caliber pistol and used the service weapon to shoot Romy directly in the chest. The man was pronounced dead at the scene, and Robilito was aptly arrested for the murder. Several other grisly killings such as this led to Filipinos developing a widespread fear of the song, with many karaoke bars banning the Sinatra hit as a result of violent fights and shootings, and locals refusing to even sing the track publicly, out of fear of performing poorly or that the classic record may possess a sinister curse. Filipino newspapers have since labeled the grotesque phenomenon as the My Way killings, and said killings have only continued up to as recently as 2018. It was then when 61-year-old Jose Bosmion Jr. was stabbed to death by his own neighbor, Rolando Canicio, at a birthday party in Dipolog City. Canicio was getting ready to start karaoke singing as none other than My Way began playing from a jukebox, before Bosmion rudely grabbed the mic away from his neighbor. As one can imagine, this action resulted in a heated fistfight, though the scrimmage took a horrifying turn as Canicio began ruthlessly stabbing the senior. Bosmion was rushed to the hospital following the incident, but was ultimately declared dead on arrival by attending physicians. The Philippines' culture of violence and alcoholism are among several contributing factors to the My Way killings, though the Sinatra all-timer itself is also noted for having an influence on its anonymous murders. Butch Alvarezson, the founder of a Manila-based vocal school known as Center for Pop, reasons that My Way's underlying messages of vanity and egotism effectively trigger such violent responses to performances of the song. I did it my way. It's so arrogant. The lyrics evoke feelings of pride and arrogance in the singer, as if you're somebody when you're really nobody. It covers up your failures. That's why it leads to fights. If there's anyone who dreads the arrogance of Frank Sinatra's age-old classic the most, it's undoubtedly the man himself. As his own daughter Tina has stated in a 2000 interview that the legendary singer actually loathed one of his most successful records, further telling the BBC, he always thought that song was self-serving and self-indulgent. He didn't like it. That song stuck and he couldn't get it off his shoe. Though its status as an adored all-timer is indisputable, My Way has become notorious amongst Filipino communities for the series of karaoke killings that its melodies have attracted. And today, the song's alleged malsons have gone on to formulate just one of several chilling cases of cursed media. Directed by Mel Gibson, The Passion of the Christ is a 2004 film which portrays the harrowing final hours of Jesus Christ's life before his crucifixion, a period known amongst Christians as the Passion of Jesus. The biblical epic received polarizing feedback upon its release. Some admired the film's cinematography and performances from actor Jim Caviezel as Jesus of Nazareth, while others condemned the movie for its significant usage of gore, as well as alleged promotions of anti-Semitism. Still, The Passion of the Christ is widely considered the most popular Christian movie ever created, and even makes it into the top 10 highest grossing rated R films of all time. The movie has its fair share of agonizing moments on screen, but a chain of events that have occurred behind the scenes have led many to believe that Gibson's biblical drama has been the subject of supernatural punishment during the film's making and in the years following. It's no surprise that movies as graphic and unrestrained as The Passion of the Christ can be physically grueling for all of those involved, but the amount of pain that Caviezel and the rest of the crew endured during their time on sets is quite frankly unparalleled, and for the most absurd reasons imaginable. The most infamous series of brutal incidents were undoubtedly the 3 alleged times Caviezel and an assistant named John Michelini were struck by lightning. According to Caviezel and Gibson, the lead actor suffered lightning strikes on not just one, but 2 separate instances, during the Sermon on the Mount sequence and the crucifixion of Christ. Supposedly, Caviezel recalls knowing he was about to be hit seconds before being struck for the first time, claiming he was lit up like a Christmas tree as it happened. Caviezel's body was said to have illuminated, and the top of his head was ignited in flames as Gibson and the rest of the crew became aware of this freak incident. Just minutes after, John Michelini went over to the wounded Caviezel to ask if he was okay, before, like something straight out of a myth, he was struck as well. The first 2 strikes surprisingly didn't require further medical attention on Caviezel or Michelini, but this was far from the case when lightning struck the film's set for a 3rd time, and the second upon Caviezel himself. The actor claims he was struck again during the movie's crucifixion scene, and was taken to the hospital as a result of his injuries. Caviezel even revealed that doctors had pronounced him dead for a number of minutes, before he was then revived shortly after, a miracle he believes was the result of divine intervention. Now, everyone knows how rare the odds are of being struck by lightning just once, an unlikely 1 in 15,300 chance. But for it to strike in the same area 3 different times is a whole other level of improbability. As a matter of fact, the odds of this bizarre phenomenon actually occurring are exactly 27 billion to 1. Of course, this has led many to question the authenticity of Caviezel's lightning strike incidents in recent years, believing these stories to be nothing more than fabrications as a means of guerrilla marketing. That's not to say that Caviezel didn't experience any difficulties while filming on set though, because he certainly still did, and this pain was as authentic as it gets. Caviezel indeed suffered through accidental lashings, a number of severe migraines, a lung infection, both pneumonia and hypothermia, and a dislocated shoulder which came as a result of a 150-pound cross being dropped onto him, a moment which is still viewable in the final version of the film. One could even argue that Caviezel has still been dealing with the consequences of a divine curse beyond the days of the Passion of the Christ filming process, as he has yet to enjoy any genuine A-list stardom since his most famous role as the King of Kings. Magical Princess Minky Momo, a Japanese anime which originally ran between 1982 and 1983, is a series adored by many fans for its pink-haired star Momo, and is widely viewed as a staple of the then newly established magical girl genre in Japan. Wholesome, innocent, and always charming, Momo comes from a celestial utopia known as Fener Narsa, having been sent down to Earth by her royal family to restore the dreams and hopes of mankind. There, Momo would become the daughter of a childless couple, while the show continues following her adventures of bringing happiness and joy to the world through various different occupations. Whether it was as a veterinarian, police officer, or even a flight attendant, Momo seemed to never fail at finding solutions to the hardships of life. And in doing so, she was able to win over the hearts of a considerable number of young Japanese girls. The show's executives always aimed for Momo to have an undeniable appeal to children, which allowed them to further capitalize on her success through manufacturing a variety of merchandise in collaboration with a Japanese toy company known as Poppy. In the same way as countless other kids shows, these sales became a #1 priority for the Minky Momo franchise and its toy sponsor, and you could see it in the many different forms of merchandise having been produced, including toys, mugs, and even record releases. However, although Minky Momo had always received strong ratings, its merchandise sales were rather lackluster in comparison, and as such, Poppy were forced to pull their funding from the show. This was undoubtedly a devastating blow to the Minky Momo franchise, and Takeshi Shudo, then the series writer, knew alongside the rest of the production studio that it marked the beginning of the end for the beloved anime. Playing with the cards he was dealt, Shudo ultimately chose to close off the Minky Momo series on his own terms, doing so as a form of retaliation to Poppy's withdrawals. In what was intended to be the show's finale, the notorious 46th episode saw Momo being fatally struck by a large truck. It was the moment when Minky Momo's tone abruptly shifted from delightful to dreadful, with the most ironic aspect of this scene being that said truck had also been carrying a number of toys, an unmistakable metaphor of Momo's death being inflicted by Poppy themselves. You can imagine just how traumatizing the character's ending was to Minky Momo's child audience, but things weren't all bad in the show itself. Momo eventually returned after being reincarnated, and the series even continued on for 17 more episodes, largely due to contractual obligations. But at least our girl Momo wasn't brutally wiped off the screen. With that being said, this show wouldn't be considered cursed if it was all sunshines and rainbows. The reality is that a series of deadly yearly earthquakes occurring in Japan have lined up perfectly with a number of Miki and Momo airings on multiple instances, making for several terrifying coincidences. The first wave of earthquakes came on the day of the infamous 46 episodes airing, when a total of 4 took place, all in areas where the episode was played. On May 26, 1983, the same day as Miki Momo's true series finale, the Sea of Japan earthquake tragically struck the nation, taking the lives of 104 and leaving 324 more injured. This brought up the total tally of earthquakes that coincided with the finales of Miki Momo to an unbelievable 5. But the 6th occurrence of this bizarre phenomenon proved to be the deadliest yet. On January 17, 1995, the Japanese region of Hanshin suffered a 6.9 magnitude earthquake that left roughly 6,000 dead and over $100 billion in damages. A grisly disaster now known as the Great Hanshin Earthquake. What does the innocent Momo have to do with this? Well, as it turns out, the earthquake came during a rerun of Miki Momo's series finale on that same date. According to legend, Miki Momo became cursed media ever since the character's forced death, with it being her angered soul that has caused such tragic natural disasters to take place every time her demise is shown. The Crying Boy is a notorious 20th century painting by the enigmatic Italian artist Giovanni Bragolin. The painting is part of a series of illustrations which all depict young boys or girls crying, intended to serve as a large-scale tribute to the many children who became orphans as a result of World War II casualties. In the 1950s, many alternative versions were mass-produced across Western Europe and England in particular, though it would be this painting of a tearful young boy glancing at the viewer which would become the most infamous of all. The Crying Boy first gained notoriety on the 5th of September in 1985, when Britain's The Sun reported of a series of house fires in the county of Essex with a rather haunting common factor. Firefighters present at each of the burned homes claimed that every time the debris was searched for items or bodies, a copy of The Crying Boy was always found, and on top of that, entirely unscathed. This inexplicable revelation made waves across smaller news outlets, further causing so much hysteria amongst local English communities that The Sun themselves went on to organize a number of bonfires of Crying Boy copies, all sent in by readers looking to rid their homes of the portrait's alleged sinister energy. The Crying Boy only continued to stir fear in the hearts of many as more and more fires took place that were seemingly in connection to the painting one way or another. Peter Hall, one of the aforementioned firefighters, actually had a brother who witnessed this very jinx for himself. After speaking of the painting's eerily untouched status and fires with unknown causes, Peter's brother Ron believed his words to be nonsensical and purchased a copy of The Crying Boy himself in an attempt to prove that the painting obviously had zero part in these fires. But sure enough, while returning to his home days after making the purchase, Ron found his house mysteriously burned to the ground, and the sole belongings still intact. Indeed, the Crying Boy. Another case is that of the Godper family, residing in Herringthorpe of South Yorkshire, who on October 24th of 1985 lost their home to an otherwise unaccountable fire. They too possessed the Crying Boy in their living room, and the most bizarre aspect of the portrait in this case was that while other paintings displayed directly next to it were entirely burned, somehow the Crying Boy remained unmarked. One unnamed woman from Leeds, England also suffered a fire incident in connection to the Crying Boy, and hers may be the most tragic of all. After hearing of the painting's jinx for multiple months, reports say that the woman destroyed her own copy of the picture to avoid any misfortunes herself. However, not even this could prevent a horrifying chain of events from occurring. In November of 1985, the woman's home was also burned not long after the Crying Boy's disposal. Inside were her husband and her 3 sons, who all fell victim. With so many more similar incidents taking place, the Crying Boy's curse soon became clear. Supposedly, those who destroyed or even possessed the painting would soon see their homes burned to the ground with nothing except the teary-eyed boy being left behind. Of course, this sounds terrifying, and many people insisted that this curse was authentic. But a much more logical explanation has been provided in the decades following the Crying Boy's initial wave of hysteria. See, copies of this painting were sold with a varnish immersed with fire retardants as a means of preserving the canvas in the case of a fire. If the painting were to collapse face down after whatever held it up deteriorated, it would subsequently be shielded from any flames in its proximity and outlast a house fire. Yes, it is odd that this painting was all that survived during many fires, but the same could also be said for all sorts of other belongings which are inflammable, and you don't see people making curses over those things either. But still, the superstitious insist that there are malevolent forces at play, and to this day, the legend of the Crying Boy and its ties to inexplicable fires persists. We've seen cases of cursed songs, films, shows, and paintings, but plenty of cursed novels have also existed over the course of time, including one from Spain, which took over 400 years to be officially published due to an alleged curse, which has led to nearly every person who made an attempt at doing so inexplicably dying. I am of course referring to none other than the Orphan story, an ancient novel authored between the years 1608 and 1615 by a Spanish monk named Martín de León y Cardenas, under the pen name of Andrés de León. The story itself follows the journey of a young orphan boy who abandoned the high society life of Spain at age 14 in favor of traveling abroad to the Southern American colonies of the Spanish Empire in search of his fortune, enduring many adventures and hardships on his eventful quest. As the orphan grows, he eventually becomes a monk residing in the viceroyalty of Peru, resembling the life of Cardenas himself, who had also made the exhaustive trip from Spain all the way to Lima as well. Cardenas first intended to publish his work in 1621, but his plans ultimately fell through when he feared that the book would damage his reputation within the Roman Catholic Church. This caused the orphan story to fade into obscurity, and the book stayed lost to time for centuries on end. It wasn't until a Spanish academic discovered the only remaining copy of the orphan story within the archives of New York's Hispanic Society of America in 1965 that the novel will be brought back to light after remaining concealed for ages. Since its rediscovery, many more attempts were made at publishing the orphan story, all of which were to no avail, as each individual who worked on their own editions died before finishing the task. These deaths included the likes of a Spanish scholar named Antonio Rodriguez Molino and a professor residing in Spain named William C. Bryant. Over the decades, rumors of a curse placed upon the book arose and turned away several potential publishers. However, this discourse meant little to Belinda Palacios, a Peruvian philologist residing in Switzerland who was left intrigued by the orphan story's chronicles of the Spanish Empire and later dedicated years to editing the book back to life. Palacios had heard of the book's infamous curse from many of her colleagues and professors, all of whom warned her of the untimely deaths met by all those who attempted to publish the orphan story before her. My teacher told me, "I must warn you, the novel is cursed. You must know that people who worked on it before have died." And I thought that he was joking, so I continued with the work. 400 years after originally being written, Palacios managed to finally publish the orphan story in its entirety in 2018, as she became the first person to ever overcome its supernatural curse. The Peruvian academic has described the process as painstaking but never dull, expressing a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to shed light on an authentic and richly detailed portrait of 15th century Spain. Today, Palacios teaches Spanish American literature at 2 Swiss universities, and even published her own novel titled Niña Gorita in 2022, with no signs of a curse slowing her down any time soon. This has been Zen. Take care.